Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Crouch, and this is Policy Talks, brought to you every month by Williamson, Inc., our county chamber of commerce. Glad to have everyone here, especially here at Columbia State on this beautiful campus on this beautiful morning. It looks like just a garden out there around the campus this morning, and we enjoy having the Policy Talks here, and I appreciate Dr. Lampley and Dr. Smith allowing us to come here every month. Got WCTV and the Channel 3 crew here with us this morning to keep us on the air, and Tom Lawrence and WAKM AM 950. Appreciate them keeping us on the air as well. Our guests today, again, are our Williamson County Legislative Delegation, or at least some of them. And I understand there's at least one more on the way, maybe two, so we'll go with the flow here. But we're happy here so far to have our Senate Majority Leader who represents our 23rd District here in Williamson County, Jack Johnson. We've got Sam Whitson, our State Representative representing the 65th District. And Todd Warner is currently not yet representing Williamson County, but assuming election results this fall, his district will come over and take in quite a bit of Spring Hill. So we've invited him to be here. And now we're being joined by Glenn Cassida, our state representative from the 63rd District. Glenn, we're glad to have you with us, and glad you wore a tie this morning. Look good. So we're happy to have all of these gentlemen. It's an effort. They are very busy these days from what I hear in Nashville, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us and sharing what's going on behind the scenes, as well as some of what we see in the newspapers and here on the media. I guess the biggest news this week in Nashville is the governor's proposal to eliminate the tax on groceries, I think, for 30 days. What do we know about that so far? Do we know any details, Jack? That'll be part of the budget, as I understand it, budget amendment.
That's correct. Good morning, everyone. Good to be back with you. Yes, the governor has proposed that we eliminate the sales tax on groceries for a 30-day period of time. We've been having conversations about given the conservative fiscal stewardship of the state over the years, the state is in, as we talk about, in great fiscal condition right now. That's because we're very conservative with the way we manage your tax dollars. And that's put us in a situation where we would like to give some money back to taxpayers, especially now when you've got gas approaching $5 a gallon. You've got unprecedented inflation that is taking place. Now keep in mind, all of those things impact state government as well, and they drive up the cost of state government too, but we're trying to figure out a way to help Tennessee taxpayers. And a number of ideas have been kicked around, but that is one that we could do, that it will be immediate. We could do it as soon as we pass the budget, maybe make it effective for July or August, and get some money back in the pockets of taxpayers. Another thing that's important about that type of tax relief is that it is we can do it on a one-time basis. You know, we talk extensively here about recurring and non-recurring dollars.
Right.
And a recurring expense or a recurring tax cut is something that is put into place into perpetuity. Something that is done on a one-time basis is something we can do with an injection. I would liken it to what we've done in the last couple of years, where we've given $100 million back to local governments for infrastructure projects or things that they may need, as well as money back to schools. So just very proud that we've put the state in a situation where we're able to do that. A lot of states out there are not talking about any kind of tax cuts or any kind of tax relief. They're talking about tax increases. Right. So we want to be able to get money back in the pockets of taxpayers, and so I think it's a bold, innovative proposal, something that we've never done before.
Sam, do we know how much that's going to cost the state yet?
$80 million, according to my senator, and but we have a surplus, like you said, because we manage our money well. And also, I got a call immediately from Karen Parrish, our trustee, and wants to make sure that the locals are held harmless. And our budget director has assured us that that will happen, and the TML is working on that. So, again, it's I think it's it will help, but as long as our communities, our local governments are held harmless and reimbursed by the state.
Glenn, Todd, do you think your constituents will be in favor of this?
Yes, cutting taxes on anything is favorable, but I think there's a lesson to be learned here. If you take a state like Tennessee and you take a state like California, Tennessee keeps taxes low, we keep regulations low, we keep government out of your life, and you have excess funds. A state like California, heavy regulations, heavy taxes. Everything about that state is collapsing, and so it's just a lesson to be learned on how to run government, and I wish Washington, D.C. would look at Tennessee.
Great. Brandon, how do you feel about the gas tax? Brandon Ogles just joined us. Grocery tax.
Well, I don't like any taxes, but unfortunately, that's just reality of living in a state that doesn't have an income tax. There has been some discussion the last couple of weeks with the prices of groceries rising so much, and the fact that tax is based on the price of more revenue to the state, and maybe if we should look at adjusting that. I think in the short term, a massive tax cut would be fiscally irresponsible.
Grocery tax is more.
Well, that or even a quick reduction even in the tax on the gas. I think we need to watch this spike the next couple months and then reevaluate. Tennessee's being as fiscally conservative as we are. We're not quick to react to things.
Right.
We've been very patient and prepared for downturns. So,
right.
But I think if the trends continue, you'll see more discussion, and you'll see maybe there will be some adjustments possibly in the future, or discussions of adjustments.
Todd, how do they feel about it in Marshall County?
Oh, they would love it in Marshall County, and I want to applaud the governor for bringing this idea forward. I'm like Brandon. I hate any tax. I know we, as a government, gotta have some taxes, and I was hoping the governor might come forth and maybe not repeal this gas tax, but maybe give some of this gas tax money back to the citizens of Tennessee. I own a small construction company. I've got numerous jobs bid that are just starting. That when I figured my diesel fuel, I figured it at $2.25, $2.50, and now the last tanker load I got was like $4.80 something. So
right.
It affects small business too.
Right. I think most of the energy and oxygen on Capitol Hill this past month has been about the education bill that the governor has proposed. Jack, you're carrying the bill for the governor in the Senate, and I presume does that involve attending the House committee meetings as well and listening to the objections and recommendations there?
I'm not allowed in House committee meetings. They don't invite me down there. No, I stick on the Senate side of the building. But but the bill did advance out of the Education Committee. We had a good hearing on that on Wednesday, I believe it was. The days run together. We've talked about it, but just in case there's people watching or listening, just a quick primer on how we got where we are. We've been talking about this for years, literally for years. We've had this basic education plan, or the BEP formula as we refer to it, for 30 years. It's outdated, it's antiquated, no one really understands it. It's just very difficult to get your mind around in terms of how we're funding K-12 education. So the governor convened a bunch of subcommittees, about 18 subcommittees made up of school board members, county commissioners, students, teachers, legislators, to examine the various aspects of how we fund education and what we pay for. And keep in mind, education, of course, is a partnership between state and local government, and so you have to take all that into consideration. And so those subcommittees met over a period of several months. Mm-hmm. And then there was a steering committee, which I sat on, that aggregated all of that feedback, all of that input from across the state in terms of if you're going to have a new funding formula that determines how money is allocated to a student, what would it look like? And I think we've ended up in a really, really good place. 39 other states have passed something similar. We're actually late to the game on this. And what the governor said is, I want a student-centered formula. I don't want to fund bureaucracies. I don't want to fund processes. I want to fund students. I want the money attached to a student. And that's what we've created. We have a formula now that will have a base formula for any kid in K-12 education. There's slightly over 1 million, I think, kids in our public schools across the state. And every one of those kids is going to get $6,860, base formula. That's to pay for a teacher, a classroom, a bus, textbooks, everything that you need. That every kid, no matter where they are, if they're a kid in public schools, they need money for this. That's a base formula. And then you have weights, and that's for someone who's from an economically disadvantaged household. That's for a child that has a unique learning need, for a kid that is from perhaps a rural district where, you know, we have counties out there, the entire county school system has 600 kids. Well, that presents some unique challenges for those types of districts as well. And the governor has said that if we redo the formula, if we scrap this BEP formula that we've had for 30 years and we put this new student-centered formula into place, he is proposing an additional $1 billion for K-12 education, the largest increase in education funding in our state's history. Keep in mind, we are under litigation. Every school system in the state has signed on to a lawsuit against the state, including Williamson County and including Franklin Special, saying we're not giving them enough money to educate children. That case is pending before the Supreme Court right now, and the Attorney General has said he feels like they may, actually have a case there. And so there's all these things coming together that make it important we do it now, that we get it done. Now, the new formula will not go into effect until 2024. So we want to get it passed. We want to get this money appropriated, get the new formula passed, and then we can come back next year once we've had time to digest it and make tweaks as necessary. So it really is. It's one of the most significant initiatives I've been a part of in my time up there. But we need to do it. And the final thing I'll say, and I'll let my colleagues chime in on it as well. Think about this. If we do this, you can take a kid out of any county in the state, any school system in the state, Pickett County, Hancock County, Williamson County, Shelby County, and you can pull them up and you know exactly how much money is being appropriated to that child based on their unique circumstances. And with that, you can then hold the school system accountable. Now, we've got great school systems here in Williams County Schools, Franklin Special, and they do a great job, and there's tremendous accountability there. That's not the case in every school system in the state of Tennessee. So we need to know where the money's going, how it's being spent, and with this new formula, we'll be able to do that.
Sam, how's that going over in the House?
Well, I'm not on education sub or full, and Glenn can maybe chime in on some of that. But I just want to say Jack is right, and I think the Senate has done some good tweaks to it this week, some adjustments to it. And, one of the challenges we have under this formula, I believe Williamson County schools will get more money, but Franklin Special is going to have a $2.5 million shortfall. And Glenn and I have talked about how do we mitigate that. There's some talk about holding them harmless 100% the first year, 3/4 the following year. But the real challenge for Franklin Special right now is just the cost of housing in their area is built out and the homes keep going up. So young, families with young kids, are they really moving into that district? And that is the challenge for them. But we just got to make sure we take care of Franklin Special because they do an outstanding job with a group of kids that, from less affluent homes. So,
Right.
But Glenn and I have talked about that, and I'll let him talk some more.
Thank you, Sam. And yeah, I do want to reiterate that Jack and Sam and I, all three, have and are continuing to talk to the Department of Education. It does take your trump card away when you're losing 6, 7, 8% of your population every year from formulas based on the number of children in your classrooms. And when that goes down, that's a difficult thing, but it does, as Jack said, it does really benefit Williamson County schools, fast-growing schools, well-performing schools. The TSUP bill was in subcommittee this week, the one I serve on. It got out. It's going to full education on the House side as well. It got out of the Senate education this week. I can tell it will move out of education, full education, onto government ops, onto finance, onto calendar rules, onto the floor.
Okay.
So that's what the trajectory is.
And it looks good in those committees?
It does. As far as I can tell today,
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of House members are for the bill. They like the transparency and what it does.
Brandon Ogles?
I think all in all, it's a great piece of legislation. There are some a little heartburn, I'd say apprehension, in the fact that the way it's we keep being told this is a funding formula, not a spending formula. But there are some aspects with, for instance, the base that there are certain things not drawn out. So there are members that are pushing back a little bit. I'm definitely one of them. There are certain things that we're required to see.
Like what?
For instance, I ran on school safety, and Williamson County's done a great job with school safety, funded that. Right now, with the base amount, we're being told that school safety is included in that number, but yet I need to see a line item and documentation to assure that those schools will spend that money towards school safety and spend that money towards SROs. Right now, Tennessee has, I believe, 84% of our schools have school resource officers, which makes us the #1 in the nation. And we'd hate to see that money reallocated because we've got in a kind of comfort level or complacent and had a tragedy here lately to remind us how valuable those officers are in our schools.
Right.
So we just want to be sure that that money's not reallocated somewhere else. That money's not, in turn, spent on facilities, new football fields, new LED lights on the baseball field, things that boosters and parents get real excited about.
Right.
It's some of the things we spend money on education are not exciting, and you don't have big boosters and clubs and people that vote for school board members and county commissioners. It's just stuff that's a necessity. It's not cool. It doesn't look good, but it just has to be spent. So with that base, there's some guardrails some of the members would like to see.
Okay.
And we understand that it's not a spending formula, it's a funding formula, but we would like to, as much as we trust our LEAs, we'd like to verify that that money is allocated in a couple areas that we're really passionate about.
Right. Todd, one of your neighbors over in Murray County there, close to your district, Scott Sapicki, is apparently one of the more vocal, I don't know if you call him a critic, but a questioner about different aspects of this. Have you talked to him, and do you know what his concerns are?
Haven't talked to him a whole lot, but I do serve on one of the education committees with Scott, and he's very concerned about our education here in Tennessee. He wants what's best for our students, and he wants what's best for our teachers. That's his two main concerns. On the bill we're talking about here, I'm in favor of it. I think there's $150 million in there, maybe for teacher salary. Am I correct on that, Senator? I think we need to pay our teachers more here in Tennessee. I think we rank maybe 40th something in the nation on teacher salaries, and if we're going to hold them responsible, I think they deserve a little bit more money. That being said, I represent right now four pretty rural counties. There is concern from the county mayors. I think it's year 5, 6 maybe. What do they call it? The maintenance effort. It could go up some in these rural counties, and there is definitely some concern there. But overall, I feel like I can support the bill.
Good. Jack, one of the criticisms of the BEP formula that I hear, understand it may not be exactly the way I hear it out there, but that the BEP hasn't been fully funded. And so my question is this bill going to be fully funded? And so the money that's the $6,600 per child, is that actually going to all be delivered to the school systems?
Yeah, great question, and it is a conversation we have a lot. Well, first of all, if you're going to use the term fully funded, you got to define what does fully funded mean. And different people are going to have different ideas about that. There are some out there that you could spend $20,000 on each kid, and they're going to say that's not enough. You're not fully funding education. And in fact, that is the premise of the lawsuit that is pending before the Supreme Court right now, is that the state is not allocating or appropriating enough money for education. Now, I would argue that we have fully funded the BEP formula every year for for the last 10 years. I mean, we've been doing that, but what I mean by that is you have a formula, and if you have a growth in student population, you have to fund the formula as it exists currently to educate those kids. And we have done that. And we've actually put additional money in for things like teacher salaries and other things. And Brandon's, the school safety money that Brandon fought so hard for, that was an additional appropriation. So we've put more money into education over the last 10 years, not to get too partisan, but since Republicans have been in control, far more money than the Democrats did prior to that. And the numbers bear that out. Now, having said that, the governor has proposed this additional amount of money. And will that be enough? It's $1 billion. It's more than we've ever put in terms of an additional allocation into K-12 funding. There will be some that say, you're still not spending enough. Well, for some, again, it could be a bottomless pit. I think with this additional $1 billion as proposed by the governor, and keep in mind, we have the money. We're not raising taxes to do that. We're not taking on debt to do that. We have that money available on a recurring basis in order to do that. Should the General Assembly decide to do it. It's been proposed by the governor. The General Assembly has to agree to that. There's always a chance that that number could be modified to some degree through the committee process. But yes, that would put us, and another way you might measure fully funding is looking at neighboring states, looking at similar states in terms of demographic makeup, cost of living. People sometimes rank us among all 50 states in terms of how much we spend per child. Well, that's an unfair characterization. It costs a lot less to live in Tennessee on the whole. It's getting more expensive, but it still costs a lot less to live in Tennessee than it does California, Illinois, New York, Massachusetts, so forth, because they have such a high tax burden. So when you modify that and adjust it for cost of living, we're fairly competitive, but this would certainly put us in the upper range in terms of states that are comparable to ours. I'm always one that has said, and I know my colleagues have said it as well, money is not the only answer. Throwing more money into a bad formula is not the answer. You need the accountability, you need the transparency. It's a partnership, it's teamwork. You need to make sure you're equipping your teachers with the appropriate training, and we love our teachers and so grateful for their dedication. We're losing teachers to some surrounding states because they pay more. I was so proud of Williamson County just the other day that voted to increase the minimum starting pay. So thank you guys for doing that to make sure we're being competitive. So long answer to a short question, I believe we have fully funded it as we've defined it. This new formula would say fully funded. It's going to take that to a higher level.
Right. The, any other comments from you gentlemen? I've got a couple other
Dave,
points.
I just want to add, since the Republicans have come in, we have put an emphasis on performance. Historically, the other party that was in power simply said, well, let's put money into it, and that solves it. Well, after looking at the state and other states, that's not the solution, just putting money in it. The solution is putting requirements and expecting return for our investment, and we've done a very good job on that.
Let me ask you this, Glenn. A lot of the criticism about Tennessee schools stems from what's going on in Davidson County and Shelby County. That's where most of the failing schools in our state are. Yeah. Is this going to fix that?
You know, continuing the way we are doing it isn't working, right? So let's try something different. This is why I'm a proponent of charter schools and failing districts. Let's look at what some research has done, and let's try it. Not guaranteeing anything, but it's better than continuing the same path and having the same outcomes.
Anybody else feel different about the charter schools? Brandon, Todd, Sam? Everybody's, Brandon might.
Well, I think it's sometimes unfair to categorize certain districts with a broad stroke. There's definitely districts that have different challenges to education. When you look at the makeup of the homes and where those children go to, and the fact that having a parent that highly engages in education, sits down with that child and does homework. We give our school districts a lot of credit and our teachers a lot of credit, but those parents being engaged are as much as part of that learning process as any amount of money or funding or even teachers in the classroom. So
Good point. Thanks for making that.
So, and that's something that's not measured in a chart sometimes, and it's not measured in a funding formula. So there are districts that have challenges, and those are uphill battles, and it's not an easy solution.
Right.
So I think we just need to be careful sometimes when we categorize and try to draw everybody or put everybody in the same box.
Right.
So.
Jack, there was apparently a carve-out in some of the amendments that have been made to bypass the local school districts with the charter schools' money. Can you explain what that's about and how that's been done?
Well, that's not part of this bill.
Oh, really?
That's not part of the governor's initiative. That's a totally separate piece of legislation. On the Senate side, that's being sponsored by John Stevens. It's not in any way tied to the governor's proposal. So I want to make sure that that's understood. The only thing the governor's proposal does relative to charter schools is to take the money we now appropriate for charter schools, and we do provide money for charter schools in those areas where they exist. We don't have charter schools in Williamson County. But to take that money, and the dollar amount escapes me right now, but is an outside appropriation. It's not included in the education formula. The governor has proposed, and I agree, that it should be part of the formula. It should be built into our total education funding matrix. It is in, I got to get into the weeds a little bit, but there are 4 components to the funding formula. You have the base, which I talked about. You have the weights.
If you get us in the weeds, you have to get us back out. So.
I'll do my best. You have the base, you have the weights, you have direct funding, and then you have performance-based funding. So those are the 4 components. This direct funding component is where that charter money is, meaning that what that means is that we as the General Assembly can decide that we want to put money into something, charter schools or something else, but we don't want it to affect the formula, meaning if the state puts money into the formula, it has a trickle-down impact on what the local governments have to put in. And the BEP does that now. When we increase BEP funding, it typically creates an additional funding burden on the local governments, and that's how it's happened for the last 30 years. The great thing about this new formula is it will give us a mechanism to where we as a state can say, you know what, we think we should spend some money on this, but not have it impact the contribution of the local government. Does that make sense? And that's where this charter funding money is. Now, back to the other legislation. Senator Stevens' legislation, I'm not sure who has it on the House side. We have a charter authorizer right now, and if a charter applicant applies to the local board and is denied the application to put a charter school into a district, they can appeal that to a charter authorizer, and they have to make a case as to why this charter school be needed. The legislation that's proposed says that if an applicant is denied 3 times in a row and the charter authorizer overrides that decision by the local government 3 times, then now they can apply directly to the charter authorizer because there's apparently some reason. But that's a totally separate bill. I don't even know if the bill's advanced out of committee right now, and these guys can speak to where it is in the House.
And Dave, I think you're talking about the legislation if a charter school can if a facility is not at 50% usage. Is that what you're talking about? And
right.
I believe the county commission or school boards have issues with that because if you take a school that's at 50%, let's say it's a new school, and they just hadn't through redistricting or they are concerned about that, and then you have to have multiple gymnasiums, and so there is concerns. And my friends up on the Hill who are pro-charter advocates have concerned about taking that local control away. So I think that's the bill you're talking about, and there's been we've been given resolutions expressing their concerns are local.
Okay. Wayne?
I add to that. On the House subcommittee, I think, to be real clear, no local money goes to charter schools. So I just want to be real emphatic on that. And I thought that Stevens bill was not on notice, and Chairman White, who carries it on the House side, made that statement, and I think Todd and I both heard him, and so we're assuming it's dead in the Senate, so I don't know if it's going to move, but I could have misunderstood what Mark was saying maybe.
Okay. Just want to remind our audience, you're going to get a test after this is over, so pay close attention here. But I'll let whoever wants to address this just grab the mic. But Channel 5 did an investigative report a couple of weeks ago that I saw a report on. And a lot of money is coming in from outside our state, from billionaires and corporate interests, to pay the lobbyists that are lobbying for this education bill, as I understand it. And I wonder if that's in the best interest of our citizens here in Tennessee. I think that's all I need to say. Just why do we depend on outside money to pay the lobbyists? Brandon, you've got a look on your face that you might have a thought about that.
Well, it's definitely eye-opening. I know one of the first receptions I went to, I had served on a non-for-profit that the Homework Hotline for State of Tennessee that helps students out of Nashville, that helps students with homework. Literally, they would call in and teachers sit, and we were fighting for every dollar of funding and donations and just to operate. So to walk into a beautiful hotel with fancy drinks and shrimp and all this, and to hear that they're a non-for-profit in education, I was like, wow, this is not how we spend our money when we're trying to help children in this state. So, some of the tactics and how the money's allocated and used definitely raises questions, especially where they're based. Now, that's, once again, broad stroke. You can't say that for all organizations, but I'm very leery to trust an organization that, one, I don't know who they are, I don't know the people that are involved with them, and if they just come into town and hire a contract lobbyist who get paid to advocate for their clients, you have to take everything that's said with a grain of salt. And there's discernment, and we all know who we're talking to. I mean, there's a difference when you're talking to a contract lobbyist and you're talking to your superintendent of schools, or you're talking to your school board members. That is not weighted the same.
Right.
You trust your people from home. You trust the people you've known for a long time. And to say that you can attend an event or see something or talk to somebody and you're obligated to side with their client or what they represent is just a stretch at best. I mean, you've elected people that care about their community and are engaged in their community, and that's always going to be the case.
Right.
So just be leery of everything you see in the news.
That is, yeah, be very, but, and Brandon, you nailed it. I mean, we want your all's feedback. We care what the citizens of Williamson County think and say, including the leadership. But every lobbyist up there is paid by somebody and something from out of state, be it a business, be it AFL-CIO, be it NAACP. I mean, the list is long. Mm-hmm. So every lobbyist, everyone, is paid for by some kind of out-of-state connection. And the vast majority of legislators is kind of, when they come in, we just kind of, okay. But the folks back home is who we listen to, and that's what we care about.
Sam, this is a great segue into a bill that you are carrying, I think, for the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House on campaign finance. Does it address any of these issues, or what are you trying to do with that bill?
Well, it does not address the lobbying process so much as it deals with several areas. One deals with the Bureau of Ethics and Registry of Campaign Finance. There's been some talk about we need to look at how that process works. How do they meet, the makeup of the board, their terms. Right now, they serve an basically unlimited term. They get reelected or reappointed, and on the registry especially. So the proposal was to limit it to 1 5-year term for each member, bring in increase the size of the board from the current 6 for the registry to 8 to include selection from the the Council on Open Government. I think I got that right. There's made up of members, you know, maybe of the chief of police associations or the different civic groups. So we're looking at that. Also, the speaker has expressed concern. Right now, when we spend up to $100 or get $100 contribution, it really, you just kind of list that in a general form on the campaign finance report. Right now, though, we want to put more visibility on that, where the money's spent and the day it's spent and what it's spent for. We felt like maybe some members, and nobody in here, but some members have spent, taken advantage of that $100 reporting cap and take their kids to McDonald's every weekend. And so we want to make sure that is being done correctly. And let me see, I got my list of other stuff. It's 40 sections plus 3 other amendments, and working it over in the Senate. And I tell you, it's been a eye-opening adventure for the past year. I may be the most unpopular guy in the General Assembly come next week when it hits the committee. But
You're still, well, I can't say this. I was going to say you're still
Bringing this up,
one of the
Dave.
most popular guys in Williamson County, though.
what's that?
I said you're still one of the most popular guys in Williamson County,
Well,
Sam. So
For a while. Anyway, so
1 of 5 anyway.
anyway, we're looking also at this 10-day reporting period right before election. Right now, there's not electronic means to do that. We're going to do that. The Senate came back with a really good idea. I got to give that to the Senate as we're going through this, is to require a photo ID if you open up a PAC. So I thought that was good. We're taking a look at 501c4s, nonprofits that get involved in elections, more reporting and transparency on that. We found out also on the governor's cabinet, they were receiving consulting fees. We had one member of the governor's cabinet, finance and insurance, is that? Or the commerce and insurance, the guy was receiving $8,000 a month from his old employer for consulting, and he was supposed to be regulating them. So he's no longer on the governor's cabinet, and we're going to put that into code that you can't do it. Also, we're looking at staff members and members of the General Assembly doing campaign work. Several years ago, Speaker Harwell had to let someone go who was a legislative assistant but was doing campaign work full time. And that committee where we're talking about looking at 2 other members on the registry is the Advisory Committee on Open Government. I want to make sure I got that right. And but it will be, we put it on notice yesterday. It'll be in local full next week, we hope. And but I just appreciate the Senate leadership and the Speaker, allowing me to carry this. I got Representative Ryan Williams is my backup on that. He's very knowledgeable of this legislation, and
Right.
it's going to be. There will be changes, I'm sure, as we go through this, but it's. I think it's needed, and we'll see where it goes.
Jack, how does that look in the Senate right now?
I think it looks well. Again, the speakers, both the Speaker of the Senate, Lieutenant Governor McNally, and Speaker of the House are very interested in this. And again, something that we've been talking about for some time. So I think it looks good.
Okay. Hand the mic down to the other end. Todd, you have a comment about that? I was fixing to ask you.
Yeah, I got a going back to the lobbyist here, and I'm a freshman member down there. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I've had a hard time swallowing down there, and you folks might not know it, but your tax dollars are going to fund state lobbyists, state-funded lobbyists that work for the administration. Any bill, I think I've had 4 bills this year killed by the administration. And what do I mean by that? Each department has what we call liaisons down there, go-betweens that go between the administration and us. And I think that they should have to register as lobbyists, because that's what they do all day. When we're in session, they're in court of the whole building, and they work on killing our bills if they don't like it. If I have something that might benefit you guys, and if they don't like it, they get it killed. Happens all the time. It's something that I've struggled with as a freshman member. I didn't realize that's how things work down there. there's a YouTube video out there. I ask you to look up, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Senator Kerry Roberts spoke out in committee the other day on it, and he explained it very well. So if you get a chance, look that up. But anyway, I just wanted to make that comment.
While you've got the mic, or Brandon, do you want to address that? He does.
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, the liaisons for the departments, they really do have a hard job, because we ask certain departments to serve certain functions as subsections of the government, and yet when we task them with doing something, sometimes we don't like how they do it. And that's the separation of powers. I was in the middle of a discussion in the hallway. To me, sometimes it's like, you tell Department of Ag to go buy tractors and how to do something, and then we as General Assembly decide to take the wheels off the tractor, and you still want them to function the way you told them to. So it's a balancing act. It's hard to hear that a department, and I think they're getting better with their wording, sometimes is fundamentally opposed to a piece of legislation. I think that they've got a hard task to fulfill, and they're really doing a balancing act, because they're trying to, in many ways, protect their department, protect the administration, and sometimes, quite frankly, there's legislation that's hostile. Yep. And that does not work well with the previous laws the General Assembly has passed. So, a good idea. And quite frankly, I haven't. I've never filed a bad bill. But, there's probably times that something has been filed that's hostile, not to the department, but to the working of the department, how it's been done previous years, and they have a hard time with it sometimes. Okay. So whether they register as lobbyists, whether we just are more careful sometimes with our words, but I do think there's value in hearing directly from say, the Department of Safety. Jeff Long, former sheriff in Williamson County, Department of Safety does a great job. When I have a piece of legislation, I take that to them before it's ever filed and say, hey, can you tell me, give me some input, do we have any conflicts here, or how can I make this better? Not all members do that. Yeah. One thing I will say is anytime anybody's surprised in the General Assembly, it usually does not go well. So surprises, late file amendments, they're hard to negotiate sometimes. Right.
Critical race theory. Apparently a bill this month apparently a bill passed by wide margins in both houses, Senate and the House, to define and instruct our education systems, I think specifically the colleges, how to handle critical race theory. Who would like to address that and tell us what's going on and what critical race theory is now, how it's defined, and how we're supposed to handle that?
Well, you may recall last year we passed legislation that I believe we all supported. I certainly did enthusiastically, that never mentioned critical race theory, but it said that you would be, our K-12 school districts would be prohibited from teaching certain concepts. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not going to teach a kid in our schools that they should be ashamed because they're white. We will not have that. And if you want that, I'm not your state senator, okay? Then find somebody else, because I will fight that tooth and nail. That you should feel guilty because of something that happened 1,000 years ago. It does not prohibit teaching history. We need to teach about slavery and Jim Crow, segregation, the civil rights movement, and you can absolutely do that. But you're not going to teach kids that they should be ashamed of who they are because of their skin color or because of something that their great-great-great-great-grandparents did many years ago. So it goes deeper than that, but that's the basic premise. That's what we passed for K-12. This bill is similar but different in significant ways. This is higher ed, and in higher ed, you've got more mature people the kids, the students, they talk about different things, and you want a free exchange of ideas in the college environment. But we've gotten far too many reports from our publicly funded universities in the state of Tennessee that kids are being penalized because of their viewpoints. They're being penalized because they disagree with a professor. And we will not have that in our publicly funded education at the higher education level. You can talk about theories, you can talk about concepts, and you can talk about things. And again, we've all received direct communication from constituents with proof that this happened because a kid challenged a professor on their liberal, leftist, socialist viewpoints and said, I don't agree with that. I believe in free markets. I believe in capitalism. I support President Trump. And they get penalized for that. That's what the bill does. It does not stifle debate or discussion at the higher education level, but it says that you will not be penalized. And by the way, not just students, faculty members, which has happened. I've been contacted by people who work in higher education and they're denied tenure, they're denied a promotion, they're denied something because they don't agree with some of these leftist viewpoints. We want a free exchange of ideas in higher education, and all viewpoints should be welcome. That's what the bill does.
So the fact that I got in trouble in 8th grade for supporting Barry Goldwater with my 8th grade teacher, that won't happen again.
Well, that was 8th grade. We're talking about a higher education bill, but no, it shouldn't happen anywhere.
I asked for that, didn't I? Did the mics pick that comment up, Creed? Okay. I had something else I was going to ask, but it's there was something about First Amendment rights that the college professors have that the high school teachers don't have. I didn't understand that. Can you explain what that's about?
Well, I think it ties into what I was talking about in terms of the higher education, and it's a different animal when you start talking about higher education and talking about different ideas and viewpoints and concepts. And I certainly believe in a First Amendment right, but you should have the same First Amendment protection if you're a conservative in higher education, and that's what we're saying.
Okay.
It should apply equally.
Right. One more subject before we ask the audience for any questions they might have. Brandon, I'm going to ask you. There was a domestic violence bill that was proposed. I don't think it passed the Senate, but you're kind of the point guy in our delegation for domestic violence, violence against rape victims, things like that. What have you got going on in that area this year?
Well, the domestic violence legislation, I had one a couple years ago that was actually registering repeat offenders for domestic violence, and you would be astounded how many cases we have in Tennessee. Tennessee is actually one of the worst ranking states in the nation right now. We're usually worst. They're in that bottom 3 to 5 percentile statewide. Why this is, some of this could be contributed to, and I have a bill right now that's running through our higher ed for our colleges, requiring some changes to the reporting and how we do reporting. Tennessee does do a really good job reporting crimes for the most part, and that's a double-edged sword. So we report crimes, we prosecute crimes, but on paper that sometimes makes us look like we're the worst of the worst. Well, we're law enforcement's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we're reporting that crimes. When you see these statistics, sometimes you have to weigh through the numbers and get down to what they actually mean. Lots of aggressive legislation going through the House right now for crimes. We have several bills that really, with criminal justice reform, and I think you heard me say this years ago, there's two movements, I would say, in the reform. One is to give treatment to those who are in drug courts that have addiction problems, those kind of petty crimes, people we may have needed to give treatment to, that we incarcerated, held for maybe too long, some could say. And then there's also, with that, is reallocating funds to further incarcerate those who we are afraid of, that are really a threat to society, who reoffend at a high rate, and those that have predatory behaviors. So right now, there's a bill that's advancing in the House that I've got. It's reclassifies some really bad crimes against children. It's extremely aggravated rape of a child, and it's actually got a life sentence. So those that really hurt people and really do bad stuff, right now the sentencing range is between 8 to 30 years. That piece of legislation has 70 co-sponsors, all of leadership on it, and it's probably one of the most aggressive pieces of legislation in the United States that's been passed in the last 20 years. Frankly, we just don't tolerate that in this state. Looking for support in the Senate. So from the House Criminal Justice Committee, you're seeing some of the most aggressive legislation in the country as far as violent offenders, sexual offenders, and the domestic violence will continue to increase. That's a heavy, heavy lift because of the huge financial burden. We do have a problem with that in the state, and part of that's more going to be educating our young people and educating our boys that we don't hurt women, we don't hurt other people, and there's ways to deal with things other than your fist and being violent.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. We do like to open it up for questions. I know this audience looks full of questioning eyes. Who would like to ask the first question? Introduce yourself, Beverly.
Maybe somebody else is here. Bev Berger, Alderman, City of Franklin. Thanks, guys. This is extremely helpful this morning, so you have a lot on your plate. I just want to make one comment. You mentioned about the lobbying through the departments, through the commissioners and the departments. I would just say one thing to that. It is government, so bear with me. Most of these departments are full of bureaucrats. We just know that. And you are mostly business people up here. And we elect you to go to the state and represent us and bring a perspective from your constituents, from a business perspective, and from a free market perspective. So walk gingerly, because I'm not a big fan of having our departments hiring and doing lobbying with you all. They can speak to you all day long, and they can make appointments, and they can ask you to come in and sit down with them, and they should. But this lobbying effort sometimes really gets out of hand because they're bureaucrats, they're not your constituents. So I would make that comment, and I appreciate you all addressing that. Thank you.
I'd like to speak to that. Thank you, Bev, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. Brandon did a great job. We work for you. If you live in Williamson County, you're our bosses. You're our shareholders, if you will, and you decide whether or not we're in office. We don't represent special interest. We represent you. They may weigh in and have their thoughts. Dealing with the administration, I went head-to-head with the administration this year on a particular bill, and what Todd was talking about absolutely happened. Someone brought me a bill. It's in the healthcare industry. I won't bore you with details, but it was a very technical kind of issue relative to a piece of equipment that's used in a particular, in hospitals usually, in ambulatory surgical centers. And they said this statute is outdated, and the department has rules that won't allow for some new technology that works better and is more efficient, takes up less space. Would you please file this bill to make this little change in terms of how that works? Sure, absolutely. I met with everybody and we talked about it. And as we typically do, I went to the relative department and I said, I'm bringing this bill. I'd like, for your feedback on it. Well, they went ballistic. And it was all because of this bureaucrat deep in the bowels of state government who didn't like the General Assembly playing in their sandbox. Well, that made me mad because we make the laws and you execute the laws. It's the executive branch, and I love our governor, and we've got great relationships with the people up there. They came and testified against the bill. They worked against my bill in committee. But you know what? I worked with my members as well, and it came out unanimously over the governor's objections. And I'm on great terms with the governor, and we talked about it. The governor wasn't necessarily that involved, but it was a bureaucrat downstream. And it was a perfect example. And I believe the House has moved through that. You guys probably know what bill I'm talking about. I don't want to disclose, what it was. But we do that. We do. And so we have to go head to head with that bureaucracy sometimes because we represent the people. They represent the bureaucracy.
About, I think it was 10 years ago now, I had a bill that would delete the executive branch from lobbying the legislative branch. That's a clear violation to me of the Constitution. And it failed. For some reason, the executive branch flagged that bill and worked against it and killed it. But I couldn't agree more, and that's something that these guys ought to look at very seriously.
I do think we have to be careful with that because many times, as we spoke earlier about the contract lobbyists from out of state, just remember those bureaucrats and those state agencies, those are Tennesseans. They have lived in the state a long time. They live in our local communities. Sometimes the wedge or part of the firewall between the contract lobbyists from out of states are those bureaucrats, are those liaisons that work for the departments. And sometimes it takes those in conjunction with certain members to hurt legislation that's bad for Tennesseans.
Yeah.
So it is definitely a balancing act.
Yeah.
Some of the work they do is really, really well. Good work. Maybe the solution is to have them register as lobbyists, but I do think that they provide a service, and they definitely advocate for their departments and that bureaucracy of government which we have created, which we have tasked them with performing, and sometimes we don't like it, but that's your beautiful democracy.
Time for one more quick question. Jessica, did I see your hand flutter when I said something about questions? That wasn't yours. Okay. What about it, Patty?
No, they're doing a great job.
Gentlemen, you get off easy today. We've, well, maybe not. Pardon me?
I feel like I'm holding a hand grenade.
Been a great discussion this morning. I appreciate, again, the time you all take to come and be with us and kind of help us understand kind of what goes on behind the scenes. Until I got involved in these sessions, I really didn't understand all the mechanics of how legislation gets done and undone, and we really appreciate the insights y'all are giving us here. I got a note handed to me a minute ago, and I'm going to read it because I want to make sure I get this right. Upon conclusion of policy talks, Meet the Candidates, which is WAKM's effort to let us get to know the other candidates that are running for election, I think in the May primaries, will be on WAKM in partnership with the Williamson Herald. Attendees are welcome to remain in the community room here if they'd like to and watch it. If they'd like to continue networking, we'd ask that they head to the lobby and the coffee station so we can go outside and drink more coffee. Thank you to McDonald's. And then the interviews will be live on WAKM and Williamson Inc.'s Facebook page. So immediately after we finish up here, if everybody wants to watch the Meet the Candidates show, you can stay in here. The rest of us can go out and pick the brains of these gentlemen more out in the lobby. Just want to thank several people for the way this show comes together. Of course, Columbia State, Dr. Lampley, Janet Smith, Mary Beth Shalley, Joe, is it Joe, that takes care of the logistics here normally. We appreciate you making us feel at home here. Of course, Creed Henderson and the WCTV crew always make us look good on TV. Well, most of y'all. And WAKM and Tom Lawrence, we appreciate you getting us on the air out there on WAKM. We do have some financial assistance from AT&T, thanks to Dennis Wagner, who's with us this morning, and from Vanderbilt University, our contact there, Lynn Maddox. We love her, appreciate them. The Good Food Group that owns most of the McDonald's in Franklin and Brentwood, is now responsible for our coffee. We got a better deal than senior coffee at McDonald's. It's free here. So if you want to get here before the 7:30 show, you're welcome to come and enjoy some coffee with us. The team from Williamson Inc., Matt, Kel, Nancy, Abby, Jenna, we appreciate all the assistance to make this happen, and really appreciate all that. Our next show will be April 29th back here. And I've got a quick question. The education bill is so complicated. Is the session this year going to last longer than through the 1st of May, or what should we expect there?
Well, in typical fashion, the Senate will be ready to adjourn here in a couple of weeks. The House is probably going to need a couple more months. Yeah, I'm teasing. No, we're still going to shoot for a late April adjournment. It may spill over into the 1st of May.
Okay, we will probably have our last session with these gentlemen next month. Hope you'll all be back. Appreciate everybody being here this morning. Thank you.